Welcome. This is part 2, chapter 10. We are looking at the building campaign of Justinian in the Byzantine Empire. We are looking here at the monastery of St. Catherine, and we are in Mount Sinai. So remember the range of the Byzantine Empire at this time. This is an early monastery. You can see it's protected with these really great walls. Justinian sent artisans out from Constantinople to do the mosaics that we'll look at within the monastery. So Mount Sinai is where Moses received the Ten Commandments, and the monastery itself is built on the spot where God spoke to him from a burning bush. So there's great theological history here. Monasticism as a practice began in Egypt around the 3rd century. Developed by people who wanted to have more spiritual way of life. So they would go about and have a much more austere and contemplative way of life. And so a site like this was for monks and then also for pilgrims. This takes you inside. We are looking at the apse mosaic showing you the transfiguration of Christ. So he is there in the center. And the 3 figures beneath him are John, Peter, and James. You see they have fallen on their face before Christ. And he stands in something called a mandorla. The mandorla is this almond-shaped ring of light that surrounds him. Notice the cross, the halo behind his head, also the hand gesture that he is making. All of these elements are significant to the Transfiguration, and again, significant to the site where the monastery has been built. So Moses and Elijah are to the left and right of Christ, and then down below you have among the ring of figures that are here, you have Justinian placed among the faces there. One of the other important things about this church is that it was dedicated to the Virgin Mary as the Mother of God, or Theotokos. So this is something that had been part of the debate, again, within the Orthodox Church. By the mid-5th century, they make an official declaration to end the debate about the divine nature of Christ. And so this here is an icon of the Virgin Mary with Christ. And here you see a mosaic of the Virgin Mary with Christ. On either side of her are 2 saints. Behind them are 2 angels, and they gaze up to the hand of God. Light comes down from the hand of God right above the enthroned Virgin. So we talked in the last video about the Arian movement of Christianity. And again, debates like this about the divinity of Christ would be resolved by official declarations that helped Christianity move forward. Another grand site and part of Justinian's building campaign is Hagia Sophia. So we are now back in Constantinople, and we are looking at a church. This is actually the 3rd time that it was built on this site, and it was built after Justinian suppressed a revolt known as the Nika riots. This was the personal church of the emperor, and it is centrally planned, but it combines element of the traditional basilica. So it was really unique in its design and extremely grand on its scale. So again, dedicated to Christ as Holy Hagia Wisdom, Sophia, and it was designed by a mathematician and physicist. Those are the names Anthemius and Isidorus that you see down below. So the dome that you look at is placed above 4 arches that are supported by 4 piers, instead of a dome that would normally be placed on a round drum. You see it's here placed on a square. So within this space are 4 arches, and then those arches are supported by 4 incredibly large piers. And we'll look more closely at the architecture of this that makes it possible. Inside, we'll look at many windows and arches within that give a great sense of light and space. Some of the windows you see here on the outside, these are buttressed. So again, that is something that helps carry the weight from the outside of the dome to the flat space beneath. And this dome is actually the second one that was built. The first one, this entire church went up in about 5 years, little over 5 years. And that first dome went down in an earthquake. This is the second one that we're looking at. Still incredibly light in its design, but a little bit higher in its projection. And this dome sits on pendentives. So this gives you a cutaway of the interior of the church. It existed as a Christian church for 900 years. Then it was converted to a mosque, existed that way for about 500 years. In the last slide, you saw the 4 minarets that surround it, even today. So this was after the conquest of Sultan Mehmed. And then 1935, the space is converted to a museum. That is the way that it exists today. So inside, you see the dome. You see the halo of light that is going to enter into the interior of the church. Lots of the mystical qualities that you have inside of the space come from the interaction of the mosaics, also the marble revetments that he has all along the walls, as well as the marble columns. This combination gives this very divine experience. The dome up above even feels almost like it's floating. So Justinian made sure that some of the finest specimens came into the building of this church from various cities in the empire. And so also he would have grand vestments on the people serving in ceremonies, jeweled interiors with the candlesticks, illuminated manuscripts, crosses, sacred vessels, processional banners, all of these things taking part in the ceremony within. And this is also where the Eastern emperor would be crowned, so he spared no expense for this space. The nave, the central space, is for the clergy and emperor, and then the laity, the common people, were divided by gender among the aisles and the galleries. So the aisles, this is the level here. The gallery level is this second level that you see here. It is almost like the church becoming an image of the court within heaven. This gives you the plan of the church. Notice here, this was the atrium that once existed, a double narthex here, that gathering space before you enter in, and you can see the length of this like the traditional basilica, but then centrally planned dome right in the center. So here is the nave, and then the apse is back here. This entire length is about 270 feet, so about 2/3 of the length of a football field, just from enormous scale. And then 240 feet in width. The dome is 108 feet in diameter, and then with the crown 180 feet above the ground. This gives you a view as you see it today. If you entered in, look at the tiny, tiny people down here. So you're looking at the central dome, and again, square base instead of a circular base, bringing together what had once been mutually exclusive traditions, the centrally planned church and the longitudinal basilica. They used brick for this, not Roman concrete, and though it was built on Roman proportions, we've seen a scale like this with the Pantheon, but not entirely on Roman principles. So the dome up above with 40 windows. Lunettes, that's the shape here that you see with double windows. The gallery level with windows. And then also windows set into the half domes. The tremendous piers holding up the weight, you don't really get a feel for in this image. But again, this gives you an understanding of the light within and some of the architecture of the church. So the pendentive emits the top portion of the 4 segments around the rim of this larger dome. And what you only see are these tiny triangles here within the space. So these very thin arches seem to hold up this tremendous arch up above. And this is the design. This is essentially what we're looking at. There are two possible designs. The pendentive is what we're looking at here. A squinch takes a little bit of a more squat design where you have arches with lintels that form bridges as a supporting wall for the dome. This is an example of a mosaic that was done late in the church, 13th century. So it shows you late developments in the Byzantine style. You're seeing Christ now looking a bit older. You see him with the beard. You see him holding a holy book. And this is Christ in deisis. So what we're not seeing on either side of him in this mosaic is the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist. That is the tradition of a deisis mosaic. So he's in a very privileged role. He is there surrounded by the Virgin Mary and John the Baptist as witnesses to his divinity. They are there to intercede for mankind in the Last Judgment. So one of the things that takes place late in the Byzantine Empire is the iconoclastic controversy. There's a real debate on the virtue of images. Is it okay to have holy figures in human form in works of art? Do we begin to worship the image rather than what it represents? So you end up having this division of people, the iconoclasts, people who want to break the image, and you actually have destruction of mosaics like this. They favored designs and patterns, or the iconophiles centered in the West, and they were okay with imagery. They supported this sort of image as representation of Christ. After 843, new emperors are going to come into rule. They are going to restore the churches that had been defaced or neglected. And here you see the term, and once again, Theotokos, the Virgin Mary, she who bore God. So again, the Virgin Mary as the mother of God. You see Christ seated in her lap. She is enthroned in this image. So again, you have this restoration of images in the 9th century. And this is over 16 feet tall, very grand. And again, it's connected to the cult of Mary that had developed as early as the 5th century when she was officially given that title of the bearer of God. Last part of the chapter will be the minor arts. We'll take a look at illuminated manuscripts when we return.